Okay? That make sense? So in the reading, they talk about this particular metaphor. It's one of their examples that they use to make the argument. Does it strike you that this is part of everyday speech, that we do this in ordinary language use? Sure, of course we do. This is not particularly poetic or literary or only found in, the writings of poets or something like that. It's something that we do every day. And if the metaphor truly means we think of this target domain in terms of the source domain, then what we have is the interesting situation in which the way people use language gives an insight into how they think. Not every culture shares this metaphor. Some cultures have a different way of thinking about argument or debate. You could imagine a very peaceful culture, I don't know of any that actually exist, but they might use the metaphor, argument is dance. Yeah. We argue and we maintain our positions and do artistic things by arguing. But that's not the way English-speaking culture thinks of argument. Okay? So, if you look at the metaphors that are used by a culture, it gives you an insight into how the people of that culture think. To my way of thinking, that makes it inherently fascinating. Understanding the connection between language use and ways of thinking. Extremely fascinating connection. Now, of course, I'm a language geek and I'm predisposed to like this kind of stuff, but I hope you find it interesting too. So we've got two terms here. We've got the target domain and the source domain. We've got one other term that is going to be important here, and it's a little bit clunky, but we have to use it. Linguistic expressions. And this is an important term, right? These are linguistic expressions. So basically it means words and phrases, vocabulary. Notice that it's very possible to look at the linguistic expressions which don't say anything about war, right? This says attack, it doesn't say war. This says defend, it doesn't say war. Shoot down and so forth, it doesn't say war. However, we can look at these expressions and ask the question, what? What question do we ask? When we see some linguistic expressions that are used metaphorically, we think, the first question to ask is, what are those expressions? Second question is, what domain do they describe? When they're not being used metaphorically, what is the domain that's being discussed? Right? And that gives you the second half of the metaphor. Then the next question is what? What is the actual topic? The actual topic is not war. The actual topic is argument. That gives you the target domain part, the first term. This is actually not that difficult. Did you find it to be conceptually overwhelmingly difficult to figure out what source domain is involved with this list of terms? No, it's easy. These are the terms that we use typically to talk about war. Did you find it extremely difficult, almost impossible, to understand what the actual topic is? Probably not, right? So, I believe that Lakoff and Johnson made an enormous contribution to understanding not just language use, but also human cognition through this theory. And in fact, this theory, which is now about 30 years old, a little bit more, has led to the development of a whole subfield of linguistics called cognitive linguistics, which is inherently extraordinarily interesting because, well, what do I mean by cognitive? What does cognitive mean?
Thinking.
Related to thinking. So cognitive linguistics is the subfield of linguistics that helps us understand what language shows about the way people think. Is the way people think interesting? Do we care about that? I think so. I hope so. Yeah. Stepping back a bit, very generally, I think, this is my personal belief, I'll give it to you for your inspection, and you can agree or disagree. My belief is that the purpose of university level education is to provide tools to students to help them increase their understanding of the world they live in. Yeah, that makes sense? This is one way to do it. Yeah, and of course, in this case, the tool is linguistics, and more specifically, cognitive linguistics, metaphor theory. It's a way to understand how the people with whom you interact are thinking by understanding the metaphors that they choose to use. Have we had any other such tools for illuminating the way people use language earlier in this course? I hope the answer is yes. And for example, starts with P, ends with ragmatics. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I think that's interesting because it helps us understand how people interact with one another, what they're doing by talking to one another. When you talk to your friend, you don't talk to your friend for the purpose of showing your friend that you can construct grammatical sentences. Is that true? Yeah, of course it's true. You have some other reason for talking to your friend, right? Speech act theory helps illuminate this, what that reason is, okay?